Hello, friends, and welcome to another Envisions newsletter interview series. Today, I will be interviewing a very familiar face to most of you in Vestigo Ventures general partner, Mark Casady. This month, we are talking about feedback, of which Mark is a massive fan, as is everyone at Vestigo, if not by disposition, by conversion. So we'll be talking about how it's a cultural value for us, how we give feedback, how we take feedback, and there will be a little bit about SVB in there as well. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and without further ado, I'll let us get right to it. Thanks. Mark, thanks for being with us today so we can talk about feedback.
That's always a great topic.
So Mark, one of the first things I was told when I joined Vestigo was that feedback is a gift. And I certainly received a lot of gifts. But I'd like to understand, I have an understanding of this, I hope, but probably for the viewers, why did you decide to make feedback such an important part of our culture?
Well, first of all, for me personally, it's the way I've learned in my career, the way I've grown as an individual is by getting feedback at work, also at home, I must admit, about how behaviors can be different or better, and how I can, make sure and understand the situation the right way. So I just have found it personally to be quite important. And then in running my previous company, LPL Financial, that feedback was also an important part of continuous learning and really helping the organization deal with a very high growth company where you constantly are challenged by new items. So when we set out to found Vestigo, we said, what are our values? And this is one of the key ones that came up in our early discussions.
And I don't think it would even be cynical to say, I'm sure it was a treat for Mike, Ian, and Mark to give Fraser lots of feedback, when he was an analyst and everyone else was a partner. And so I think what might be of interest to folks is, what are the techniques that you use to make an organization a place where you're allowed to give feedback, and as Ian likes to say, sort of manage up?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because first of all, I don't particularly like feedback any more than you might like feedback because we think we're perfect. I don't know why the rest of the world doesn't see it that way. But you do soon learn that an ability to accept feedback and truly, see it as a gift is a really important part of reinforcing the culture of giving it. So if we have a situation in which you provide information to me that says, hey, we were talking to a startup, Mark, and I was a little surprised by you taking this stance or that stance, or I was a little surprised by the tone. Then I first reaction shouldn't be, well, I don't care, right? My first reaction should be, you've observed something that's really helpful for me to learn. Let me quickly play the tape back. Yep, I was that way. You're right. I need to work on that. Or play back the tape and say, well, gee, I didn't interpret it that way. Tell me more, right? So you've got to be inviting and welcome the comment. And you've got it's very difficult to learn. It took me quite a while to just learn to think immediately, really appreciate that feedback. And I often use that phrase, as you know, in order to make sure it's clear to me that this is a moment where you feel vulnerable enough to give information. And what I want to do is encourage you to give me more.
And you already, I would say, in the telling, used some language that sort of feels like a bit of a technique, sort of like, it surprised me, or that surprises me, let's play it back. What's your feedback style? What are the things that you've learned over the years that makes feedback, when you're being vulnerable enough to give it, makes people more receptive to it?
Well, I do think you have to try to depersonalize it, as strange as that sounds. Like I want to be able to say to you, literally, here's the facts and circumstances. We were together doing this thing, right? Observing this company, talking to this person. You seem to get, annoyed, or you seem to get excited, or you seem to do something. And do you remember that, right? Before I give you the feedback, I might see, do you remember that moment? And you'd say, yes, I do remember that moment, because hopefully I'm doing this within a short time for the time I observed the behavior. And then if we can remember it together, I can say, well, when you say it that way, the listener is likely to react this way. And then did you see what the person said when you phrased it that way? You might try this other way to phrase it, right? And so what it feels like, hopefully, is that it's like, oh, this is helpful coaching. I ought to listen. not this person's telling me I'm wrong for what I did. I must admit it took me quite some time to take the wrong part out. And I love the expression Ian has. I'd never heard it until I started working closely with him in the last 7 years, where he loves the phrase, let's find the moment where someone's doing something right and celebrate that. I think that's a great way to express it. And so obviously feedback is usually in a context of something that we'd like to see a different behavior on. It's not necessarily bad, it just is, right? And almost always my experience is either in my situation or in yours in getting feedback, it's because it's something we haven't seen before or a situation we haven't dealt with before. We're just off of a weekend of a set of experiences we haven't had before. In your case, this is my third banking crisis. My first one was pretty darn scary, I have to say. You know, the last one, 2008, was super scary, but this one wasn't so bad as things go. But for you, it was really your first as, you know, an executive and an investor. And so you did a great job of asking questions and observing behaviors. And when you were curious about something, you asked a question, right? And so there wasn't an emotion around it. It was the, how do I process this new data? And almost always most of the time it's a behavioral feedback, you might try this technique versus that technique. The more you can do to recognize the learning in it, the better off you're going to be.
Well, I'm glad I was able to wear the mask because I've been somewhat stressed over the last few days, though. Today is at least you know, metaphorical sunshine because it's quite foul outside here in New England.
Yeah, so we're having a real snowstorm as opposed to the snowstorm we had this weekend. Yeah, and I think what it's also okay to have emotion, right? It's that we're humans and we're allowed to do it. So usually for me, given that I have a number of years of experience, is that I might be off, right, in a meeting, and you might observe that and say that to me, and that's a reminder to me of being present, right, and being in the moment and recognizing that, you know, I might be grumpy from having to work on the weekend where I had planned to be away, you know, with my wife. And now I couldn't because I needed to be on the phone and do those things. And so we got about half the time together I would have liked to have had. And so that can make one grumpy. And so, but I owe it to the other people I'm communicating with not to bring my grumpiness to that moment. And if you observe that I am bringing my grumpiness and you say that to me, then I've got to recognize, Mark, boy, you got to look for that trigger, dude, and remind yourself that to everybody else, this is their experience of you, and you're not allowed to be grumpy. You know, that's just not okay, given your position or given that, you know, trying to help people through a crisis or whatever else it is. So usually for me, it's learning. I always learn, but it's probably less about try this technique, and it's more about remembering to be present and remembering that there's something that I'm bringing into the discussion that has nothing to do with the discussion. That's almost always where it is. I will say at home, Fraser, I get this feedback a lot. So in healthy relationships, right, whatever they are, is that you're getting this feedback mechanism should feel really comfortable at work and should feel really comfortable at home, because it's how, you know, relationships grow and cherish, is because you've got this moment of being able to say, hey, that wasn't okay. And we need to do that differently. I did get one of those this weekend.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. This conversation has felt very authentic, very Vestigo. And we were able to make it through the conversation without missing the elephant in the room, of course, which is the events at Silicon Valley. You know, more to come for sure. So thanks so much for the time, and I hope the viewers are going to enjoy this.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.